Is it time? I'll give it 2 more minutes. I'll just ask right now, this will be a little bit of a choose your own adventure talk. How many of you guys have written like front-end test browser code? Like it runs the browser. Okay, cool. Have people here written unit tests? Good, good, good. Good, all right.
What about?
Yeah, go on.
What about using Selenium to cheat at a game?
Yes, yes. Does anyone use Selenium to cheat at a, yeah. Well, not cheat, you know, use the power of computers for your, right. Okay.
So ingress, you know ingress is good.
Yeah.
Selenium counts, right?
Okay, so
Yes.
they had a
Yeah.
bunch of sequential codes that you could enter, and a bunch of, whatever, like I discovered that they had a bunch of sequential codes. I think that they were when they released the zip portals. And so a bunch of people were like typing them in, and I'm like, screw this, I'm a developer, I'm gonna use Selenium and just script it. So they just had ranges of codes that you can enter the codes on their website or their mobile app. And so I used Selenium to just spin through all the codes and redeem them. And log what I got for them. So
All right.
cheating because you're allowed to do that. But
All right. I'll get started. Oops, a second. Did you
figure out what their post request was and just
all right. Yeah.
no, there was a reason.
Yeah. All right. My name is Jakin. It's a little bit of a weird name, so I always include my pronunciation. What I'm going to talk about today is Selenium Webdriver. The word Selenium is really confusing, unfortunately. They used it to mean different things, so I'm just going to be saying Webdriver almost the entire time. And I really like Python, so I'm going to be talking about Python. There's Selenium Server, and then these are 2 other pieces I've kind of added that have helped a lot. And I'm going to talk about those things too. I'm going to do this part really quick because, well, about half-ish of you have done browser automation before. I'm not a tester. I'm not a QA person. Obviously, I test my own code, but I don't do it. I don't do it as much as I should. Who does? And one of the reasons I don't is because clicking around in a browser is boring. It's not interesting. It's slow. It's easy to make mistakes. You know, you go down a long process. You kind of make a big change. You don't really want to go back and start over at the beginning and do all that stuff. And for all these reasons why typing and clicking is bad, you can multiply that by as many browsers as your project is going to support. So it's awful. If you write code to drive the web browser for you, it's fast to run. It can be slow to write, at least initially. If you start to build up a little bit of a library and some helper stuff, you learn the API, it continues to get better and better and better. And this is the best part. If you write this well, usually, it doesn't always work, but a lot of times you can I think this is right. Let's see if it runs in 6 browsers. And it is way better. It's way more fun to do it this way. You can go get a beverage, and you know it's the new compiling for web developers. And this is a big deal to me, and I think it's a big deal to most software engineers. Testing can be really boring And you don't do it because it's boring. And being able to turn the testing process into a coding process makes it interesting and fun. And then it really can be a maintenance headache. Front-end stuff changes, it's a lot. The code is really fragile. It's really hard to write robust code. And you kind of just gotta keep that in mind.
Isn't that anti-interesting and fun though?
What?
Maintenance headache?
Yes. Yeah, it is. No, right. That's true. The way it's good, like this is fun the first time. It makes it fun the first time, and then down the road, it can become a maintenance headache. Right.
Yeah. You
Right.
structure it much like your code, though, right? You create a framework, you create
Yes.
methods in it, right?
Exactly. No, right.
Same patterns in there.
No, you're absolutely right. You get into it. So these are the things, browser automation. I've already covered some of this stuff. Tests are good. Developing web apps, this could be a real good way to work sometimes, most times, but it depends. If you're working with QAs and you can coordinate with them, if you have some front-end tests written, they really appreciate that. When you give them your code. And this is the big thing. If you're working on something and you have you know what it's going to look like, and there's going to be a lot of steps that has to happen sequentially, front-end tests can be the only sane way to work on it. I worked on this one thing where it was a contest, and you could refer 30 friends to get additional entries in this contest. And I mean, can you imagine testing this by hand, 30 emails? Oh no, it didn't work. So go back and have to do it again. It really, if you have a long thing, it's going. And then this last one it's really kind of a judgment call. I think I have a hard time doing. I've never even tried to do test-driven development with front-end tests. That sounds like a nightmare to me. Maybe someday when I get really good at it.
Well, I think at that point it's called behavior-driven development.
Yes, right. Yeah, that's true. That's true. And then if the HTML is still in flux, like, oh, I'm just doing the ugly developer version, and then the front-end people are going to go make it pretty. You're probably wasting your time writing a lot of browser stuff. So yeah, this is great. Let's see code. So this is just a real simple example of what WebDriver can do. It's fun because you can play around with it. You can get the Selenium package, or the WebDriver package, I mean, and just in a few lines, the API is very intuitive. So this is, let's see. This is the same slide again. So this is a little demo of me running that. Just run it like a Python program. It fires up a web browser. This is something, it doesn't work anymore very well, but it's a little, I did an experiment a few years ago with Google App Engine. So it's a zombie translator. This is just some other stuff to keep in mind. Writing good HTML can really make your front-end tests way less fragile, way more dynamic. If you have good use of IDs, good use of classes, it makes all the difference in the world. You come to the good example is normally you can use like regular jQuery-esque rules to find the stuff you need. If you start having to use XPath, then you're in for a bad day.
Lots of beer.
Lots of beer, exactly. Exactly. So I started playing around with this, and it was fun. It was great, but I needed a little. I needed to go further. And yeah, I mean, web browser automation stuff is great, but I wanted to add. I needed to do stuff not in the browser. And part of the reason was this is how I do all my work. I am the smiley face. And then over SSH, I have, there's a web server where all the files are that I'm working on. And then I don't have direct access to the database that all this stuff is getting stored on. So I combined it with Fabric. And Fabric is, I don't know if anyone knows of any like non-Python equivalent in another language. It's a SSH command line tool for streaming. It gets used a lot in deployment scenarios. So you want to do the same stuff to deploy software, and you need to run a bunch of SSH commands on a server. You can do that in an automated way. And I wrote some libraries around this, and pretty soon I could do stuff that I couldn't get to through the web, through the front-end testing. I could read config files on the server. I could test and make sure that, like, say I uploaded a file as part of a web test, I could go and make sure it had the right permissions. Good stuff like that. And this is really nice when you want to combine the database, like basically like say you want to insert 1,000 records to test the, or 1,000,000 records to test, make sure your app doesn't crash at big sizes. If you want to run all this stuff through the front-end test, the web browser, it's faster than you typing it in, but it's really slow. And if you can add this back-end piece to it, it really speeds it up. And then there's a lot of times there's parts of your application that aren't exposed through the web. Maybe it's a database table, it's a file somewhere, and you can use Fabric to go and actually check that and make sure. Oh yeah, so now we're just going to sort of get into the random things that I found really helpful. Is as a developer, because I don't actually write tests, when I write my front-end tests, my front-end driver code, I hardly ever put in assert statements. Basically what I do is I write code to drive the web browser up to the point where I'm working on it. And then I just sort of take over with my mouse and keyboard. If you want to give this a shot, you've got to keep your software up to date. I've been burned by this several times where my code stopped working and I'm like, what's going on? It turns out web browsers get updated a lot. And it's even becoming less and less obvious when they're getting updated. And if you don't keep your WebDriver, they do a pretty good job of keeping pace with browsers out there. But I've gotten burned a few times. And it's good to, don't just like download this by hand. Get a good package manager will go a long way to keep you up to date. Most of the bugs I have come across in these things, so basically when you do a command like type in this text in the web browser, it's supposed to wait till it's done to run the next thing. And with like asynchronous stuff, and I don't know, there's a lot of bugs I've seen where all you do is you just wait a second manually before you do the next thing, and you go on to that. This is something I just discovered to help you write your front-end tests. Kind of with the development thing, you can have the WebDriver code take you all the way up to the cool part, and then if you're using Python or some other Python, language with a nice console, you can drop right into the console. And if we have time, I can give a demo of that. This is just some code I found the other day, and it's awesome. This is, I failed at writing front-end tests until I found this. This and this it's called the Rosetta Stone. Here's a zoomed in thing. Basically, it's just a big cheat sheet of all the stuff. The brown is XPath, the less brown is CSS rules, and then that's DOM. And basically, these are how you find the chunk of HTML you want to do something with. I think I have links to this at the end, but it's
parse through it, in other words, right?
what?
Parse through your HTML.
Yes. Yeah, it's called the XPath CSS DOM in Selenium, the Rosetta Stone. Oh yeah, so then the other thing that really helped a lot, and this sort of goes back to the library, having libraries to help you with all this stuff, is I actually, even though I don't write many tests, I actually started using a test runner. And that got me several things that were really nice. The main thing is it lets me have config files, logger levels. I can write my own plugins for the test runner. And basically it lets me put all my setup in one place. So a lot of times they'll be like, okay, we've got, we're working on a project. There's like 3 different copies of it that different people are working on. And I'm working on one, and then someone's like, oh, I've got a problem at step 6. I can change the config file so it points to their version of it instead of mine, and then it just works. And it's a really nice way to get to make your code more dynamic. Yeah, so basically I wrote a Nose2 plugin that does all the setup work for me. It could log me as administrator, do some administrative stuff, publish, log out, and then I can start running the actual WebDriver code that takes me to the spot I'm working on. Oh yeah, you can also use Nose to, and this is a plugin I've written, and hopefully at some point this year I will have the source code published, because I think it'd be fair. I need to make it a little more generic, but you can basically say in the config, I want to run this in these browsers, and you can also just sort of throw in special site-specific, just like a project-specific values, like, the API for such and such has these credentials, or the ID of a particular page that's important is this, and you can just put arbitrary information in config files that Nose2 will load, and then your WebDriver code can take advantage of. And the simplest. Not simplest, but a relatively easy, fun thing to write in this, with sort of taking all 3 of these pieces together, is take Nose2, you read in a config file that says what site you want to look at. And I haven't worked in WordPress for a while, but I'm pretty sure this would totally work in WordPress. And then you use Fabric to get like all the page IDs that live in WordPress or whatever you're using. And then you use WebDriver to visit every page and make sure none of them have error codes. And sort of all 3 of these things together, you kind of, and if you wanted to, you could throw that in a continuous integration suite or something like that, and you've got a real nice thing that checks every page on your site. If you wanted to add a little bit more to it, and I've done the last part, I have not done this part, but if there's an easy way to find out if a page requires a logged in user, if you're not logged in, you should get redirected to the login screen. And then you could also run all the HTML, CSS, and JavaScript through validators and stuff like that, and make sure it's clean. If some of you are either not serious coders or kind of want to dip your toe in the water, this is actually how I got started in all this. There's 2 good options. One is the Selenium Firefox Ide, and this is kind of a nice, it's not nice. If any of you have used it, it's simple. Yeah, it's a nice way to get started. And the coolest feature is you can just fire it up, hit the record button, start doing stuff in your web browser, and then play it back. I've found it to be really buggy. Maybe someday it'll be better. We can hope. And I actually gave up on this whole idea initially because this was so buggy. I figured this would never work. And the other cool thing it can do is it can export code. It'll actually generate, as you record your actions, it'll generate the code for driving it in whatever language you want, and you could edit it if you wanted later on. But the code it exports is hideous. And then this is sort of what it looks like. You can see there's the little record button up there, and these are the things it recorded and open, a click, and then another click. And this is actually the one that got me hooked. Fake, the web browser. It's cost $30. If any of you, I'm a really big fan of OS X Automator. If anybody uses that, and this has a similar interface where basically there are these on the far side. There are those big actions, and you kind of drag them over like big puzzle pieces, and you plug them together, and it's just kind of a fun gooey way to build these things. Now I have some links. I can, let's see. I'll say a few things about those. The word, I feel like the word Selenium is very confusing. That there was an old Selenium 1.0 was the original libraries that did all this, and it didn't do a very good job. And then they changed it to Selenium 2.0, which they renamed Webdriver. And there's also Selenium Server. The fun thing, if you really get into this, you can run your browsers on other machines, and you can hit a button and it will run all your browser control things on another system. And they provide. I've only begun to dabble in that. It would be. I'm excited about it though, because you can then you can do different platforms. They support mobile phones, all kinds of stuff. This is the Python web docs, Fabric, and Nose. That's where you can get the Selenium IDE. And then it's a little bit dated now, but they spend a lot of time talking about the future, and that was like 2011, so the future's now. If I'm an auditory learner, and the Floss Weekly is a great podcast. It's just they spend an hour talking to someone who knows an open source project really well. And usually it's one of the founders or one of the main contributor or the leader or something like that. And it's just a good show. And I finished a little early. I can either demo some more code. I have a few more examples. I can kind of show how it works. Sure.
I have a question.
Yes, your questions, yes.
Okay, you said you dabbled a little bit with the Firefox plugin.
Yes.
The code generated by that is directly usable by WebDriver?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, and it's fun because it's a great idea because you can actually even pick the language you want to export it in.
I played with it a little bit, but I wasn't sure that you could put it right into WebDriver.
Yeah.
That's great for me because what I really want to do is have my tester run through all the test cases, and then I'm at that same point as you where I'm trying to get the server set up to run across all sorts of.
We had problems with that with setup stuff. So there was some setup config stuff that we had to figure out how to get exported, or steps for people to. All right, you have to do this, this, and this to get these Selenium tests to run right, because our QA had set up this box a little bit differently than what we had, and they wouldn't run it all for me. And it took us a long time, but we figured out there were some setup issues that he had done.
Yeah.
It just took us a little bit of while to figure that out if that's something we wanted towards.
This is.
He was doing the record and click mostly, so he's in the transition of converting over.
Yeah.
What has your experience been like with this and JavaScript events on the page? and Ajax calls that load content and data into the page. And
You know, I've been amazed how well it's worked. It hasn't been 100%, but I remember reading about this, and they said it supported it, and I was like, really? And it totally does.
now, is this Selenium 2.0 that you're
Yes.
using? Okay.
Yeah, from the reading and listening to that podcast, it sounded like the 1.0 wasn't even worth bothering with. Like even at that point, it was a couple of years ago, and they were saying, so that's, I've never written any Selenium 1.0.
I have found that the tests you create with the plugin, you can also kind of go in and modify the
Yes.
code that it generates. If like your test is a little bit off, or the timing's off or something, you can just modify it.
Yeah.
It's easily readable, so it's not too difficult.
Yeah. So like you can go here. So it's kind of fun. I can do it in HTML, and then where can I change the language?
Is it up under tools?
Oh.
That's some problem with Ajax stuff too. We had Ajax heavy side, the wait times, trying to get those like figured out.
Right. Have you?
When you're running them locally, going, all of a sudden it's like, oh, test failed, and it failed because it took 4 seconds instead of
Right.
3.
You want to wait for an event.
Yeah, that's what I was saying. There's cool. I could try to. Yeah.
We're like swapping things out.
Oh
It
yes.
fires, and when it's not completely loaded yet, and it goes to try and grab something that's
Right.
not there.
That's why you wait for an event, or wait to do an object exists, or wait for that object.
Or wait for text to...
And see, I've done that, and I still, like, it'll work if I pull up the browser and I do it.
Right.
In the test, it doesn't work.
Right.
And
I've-
I'll
yeah.
show me the page, and it'll print out a copy of the page, and the data's not there.
Right. I've spent a lot of time on. Yeah. I spent a lot of time on Stack Overflow, and there's sort of a continuous amount of issues. I've run into stuff like that, and then I've updated my WebDriver libraries, and then it worked. So I don't know. So if you just if there was just a browser update or something like that. The other thing that's interesting is it's nice to have the code handy to swap out different browsers, because it's a good way to find out am I crazy, or is the code wrong, or something like that. Because this having to put in sleep statements is boring, and it just slows down the whole thing. And you're waiting a long time anyway. Let's see.
Could you show an example of what knows, what you're doing in knows?
Yeah. Let's see. Do. So the other thing is, I'm still learning Python. So if you see anything in here that's really un-Pythonic, I'm sorry. Please don't. I'll make this a little bigger. So the AMM is just that's the CMS that I'm using. So here is here's the nose events. This is a plugin object, and we're inheriting from it. And this in the command line, I'll pull that up. You can specify a config file, and it's just a INI style file. And in all your plugins, you have access to it. So you can just read in if you basically just put.
It works like a web config in .NET.
Pardon?
But
Oh.
In .NET you can do similar.
Oh.
to web config.
Yeah. You can just pull in whatever you want. Oh yeah, this is the other thing. I know, the other gotcha. I've continuously run into problems where if element isn't visible horizontally, it can't find it.
Has to be in the viewable screen.
So what?
Has to be in the viewable screen.
Yes, I've run it. Yeah, well, sometimes it does, sometimes it doesn't. I can't figure that out. So this is just a nice thing. It makes it. I can set a minimum width. So whatever site I'm working with, it'll set the window big enough that it'll work.
Sets up your preconditions.
Exactly. Yeah, and that's mostly what I use Nose for. It's a great. I've written some actual front-end tests where it does the certs and it does the reporting and all that stuff, and it works great for that. But I don't use it for that very much. And then what was the other piece? Oh yeah, and this is fun. This is just a little thing. Because I know I want to run all my tests someday on a separate Selenium server, I have this thing fire up a standalone Selenium server on the machine I'm working on automatically too, if it's not already running. And that turned out to be a big time saver.
So do you feel that Python's really gave you a huge advantage? I mean, as far as running the scripts?
I liked being able to go into the console, because I can do a quick demo of that too. It's nice because when you're just trying to figure out what's going on. Python. Oh, this is the right place. And let me pull up. This is the web browser it fired up. So the nice thing is I can inspect, like I can inspect this. And this is a, let's see, so it's just, so that I can, where's my mouse? So I'm in the console, and basically I have access to this page. So if I'm trying to figure out what code I want to write, I can just do browser dot find element by class, and I can do English. Oh, class, sorry. I'm still class name. So then there it is. And then I can clear it. Oh. What did that just do? Not currently visible. Oh, English phrase text area. That's what I should do. Yeah, cleared. So it's kind of I really appreciated that. It's just it's a nice way to make sure I can type it in the console and then paste it in my code.
It's almost like an immediate window or whatever.
Yeah.
How you're using it.
I think so. I think, yeah.
If you were actually writing unit tests, then you could mock it up into your interpreter and put it in your nose test.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. And it's a nice way to work. And then I just like the Python language. I like white space. And that's just a preference thing. Let's see. Any other questions or anything anybody wants to see?
Yeah, of course. So
Sure.
with Python compared to like Java or .NET, with using Selenium, what would you recommend? Or is it whatever feels comfortable, or
Yes.
is
That,
it whatever?
I've written in I started messing around in PHP because that was the language I know the best. And then I got into Python, so I liked it. So it was totally a preference thing. Although I would say WebDriver is powerful by itself, but if you can combine it with other things like Fab, at least for me anyway, like think about the other things you can kind of combine it with, and that might make you want to change the environment you work in. But to just get started, yeah, go find the language you know. Like it's kind of an interesting model where they basically define an API, and then different projects implement the API in whatever language there is. So yeah, there's Java, there's Ruby, C#, PHP, anything like that. No? All right. I'll probably, go ahead.
So say you have a bunch of pieces of community-generated content. You have like lots of JPEGs, and you want to match like styling of JPEGs with styling of HTML elements.
Yeah.
Is there any way to like, I don't know Python very well, actually at all, but like how would you like collect a whole bunch of screen caps?
Yes, that's a good question. Well, the Selenium API is kind of cool. It supports screenshots. It's just a command. When you have a web browser up, it's just a single command, and it'll save the the screenshot of the browser window for you, which is nice when you're running it on remote machines and it breaks, and you're like, well, what did it look like? You can save a picture and see, and you could do that. You could, I imagine you could combine something where you would take pictures and then run it through some sort of image processing thing, and then spit out some sort of result.
Does it do just the viewport, or would it do the whole web page? Like if the web page is longer than the screen?
I've never actually done it. I've always meant to. It's at least the viewport, but it might be the whole. What's the other thing? The whole.
Whole shebang.
Whole shebang, yes. Canvas, that's the word, canvas. I think, is it canvas, I think? It might be the whole canvas. Or that might be an option. You can say, I want this or I want that. Yes?
So I apologize since I missed like 90% of your talk, but have you messed around with Phantom.js at all?
A tiny little bit, mostly just reading about it.
Okay.
It seems like a really good idea.
It's pretty cool because like you don't really need the web browser part. It's like embedded. If you haven't heard of it, it's like a headless web
Yes.
browser.
No, and I like, yeah.
It's called Phantom.
Right.
Yeah.
No, and I like the idea a lot. The problem is a lot of times my code works great in WebKit. It's IE.
It doesn't support anything other than Chrome.
yeah, right. Well, we don't all have that luxury. So.
Well, actually now, with Blink.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, they're going their own way. This could get complicated again. Yeah. So
but it's pretty cool, and you can. There's this thing called Winery, which you can connect like a debugger to. Since it's like
yes.
headless, you can't see anything.
Right.
But you can connect like your debug, like your WebKit inspector. So that's pretty cool.
Right.
Isn't there something with Phantom or Casper.js where you can compare screenshots? So it'll tell when your
oh, that's pretty
layout's all
sweet.
bunged up because it's different from the original
I
screenshot.
need to find
That would be awesome.
It was on Hacker News a while back. I thought it was really cool.
I know some Brett Slatkin from Google has written a system for doing perceptual things like that.
Wow.
So he takes it's not a saved screenshot. They actually make the same request to the public website and then the staging website, and then diff it to see if the staging website's different. It's pretty cool.
Yeah.
That's pretty cool. All right. Thank you.